Hello everybody and welcome back to another CB Show Tunes tutorial. Now today what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting into our camera controller for our third person character. Now I know it's been a couple weeks, but I've had like a little bit of a problem setting up the camera collision and it's just been a pain in the neck. But I wanted to make sure that you guys had a quality product instead of something that was just shoddy and quickly thrown together. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Now, we are going to make some adjustments to our player controller or our player script. So we're going to first go over into that because we want to make sure that we get everything taken care of. So there's only a couple things that we changed here. Let me go ahead and pull that up for you guys. Right? Okay. And let me get this thing pulled all the way in. Okay, cool. So inside of this, what we're going to be doing is, let's actually scroll up to the top. We have a couple new things. So as you can see, we have a private quaternion called rigid body rotation at the way top here. We're going to be utilizing this to be able to control our character's rotation. All right. All those things are the same. Make sure that you have this rotation put inside of your update. I believe that that is how the original script was because we only made just some slight updates here. So as you can see inside of our void fixed update, we made some major adjustments here. We actually got rid of this move force area. We don't need that anymore. We're actually going to replace it with something a little bit better. So we're going to first add this question, if you will. So we're going to say if our mathf.absolute right input is greater than 0 or our forward input is greater than 0. So that's all we're asking here if our input is being pressed down. So it doesn't matter if we're going forward or backwards, as long as an input is being pressed, then we're going to run this stuff here. So if we are doing that, then we're going to create a vector3 called move direction. And this is going to be equal to that rigid body rotation quaternion that we created. And we're going to multiply it by, and make sure that you put it in these parentheses, vector3.forward multiplied by speed. Now, what this is doing is essentially setting our direction using this rigid body rotation, and then we're allowing it to move us forward by whatever speed is available. Next, we're going to say movedir.y. So we're going to assign the y position, and we're going to make that equal to our rb.velocity.y. Essentially, we do not want to change the value of our y axis, because that is like our falling and our jumping axis. Then we're going to set our rb.velocity is equal to our movedir. So from here, all we're doing is just assigning the velocity value. Else, so this is outside of this if statement, we're going to say rb.velocity is equal to a new vector3, and we're just going to assign it to our current velocity. So rb.velocity.x, rb.velocity.y, and rb.velocity.z. Okay, so lastly, we're going to set our, or not lastly, what am I talking about? So we're going to go down to our void rotation, and this is where we're going to be setting up our inputs, right? So we have a couple things that are new here. We're going to go over the entire rotation thing because why not? So we're going to say if our right input is equal to 0 and our forward input is equal to 0, we're going to return, which means if we have no input going down, we don't need to worry about this rotation setup. Then we're going to say, okay, vector3, cam forward. We're going to create this vector3 essentially, and we're going to make it equal to our camera boom or camera.main.transform.forward. So whatever direction our camera is facing, that's sort of what we're going to be getting our direction from. Then we're going to say cam forward.y is equal to 0. So we're just making sure that we're not going to deal with any sort of height issues or whatever. Next, we're going to say quaternion, or create a quaternion called cam rotation. And this cam rotation is going to be set by saying, okay, quaternion.look rotation, and then we're going to assign our camera.forward. So essentially, we're setting that to rotation based off of our camera direction. Then we're going to create a variable called target rot, and we're going to make this equal. And this thing is pretty much the same, but a little bit different. So mathf.aton2, put in our right input, our forward input. We're going to multiply it by our mathf.rad to degrees, so radius 2 degrees, and then we're going to add our camera rotation.eulerangles.y, and this is the thing that's different than what we had. Then we're just going to assign it, so we're going to say our current transform.rotation equals to a quaternion.slurp transform.rotation quaternion Euler, assign 0 for our x, target rotation as our y, 0 as our z. Then we're going to set a rotation smooth as our speed time. And then lastly, inside of this script, we're just going to assign our rigid body rotation, make it equal to our quaternion.euler, assign 0 for our x, target rot as our y, 0 as our z. Then we're just going to set the movement, so rb.move rotation is equal to our rigid body rotation. And that's all we have to do with our player script. So everything else is the same. I know that's a lot, but I mean, it is what it is. All right, so now let's get into the actual camera script. So I'm actually going to drop this down real fast for y'all. So if you do not have a folder for your scripts, make sure to create that folder by simply go over to your assets folder, create folder by right-clicking, call it scripts. If you don't have a controllers folder inside of there, just simply create a folder, and same thing. And now you're just going to create a C# script called camera controller. So make sure to open that up, and we're going to just boop right there for y'all. And inside of here, we just have a couple things. There's not super complicated. Not as complicated as the previous one, at least. So we're going to have a couple serialized fields. So we're going to create a serialized field for our private transform called target, a private float called camera speed. I assign this to 2 by default, but you can do whatever. A private float for smooth time. I think I assign this to 10 inside of the actual game, but you guys can set it to whatever. But this is just my default. We have a private vector 3 called offset, and this is going to be the position that we want the camera to reside at if it's not interacting with anything. And then, of course, a private layer mask for our obstacle layers. So essentially, whatever the camera is going to be hitting and reacting to, that's sort of what that's for. All right, so the next thing we're going to have is some private variables that are not serialized, and these are just going to be references. So a private transform for our camera boom, a private float for our look, and a private float for our turn. I defaulted both of those to 0. Then we're going to go into our void start function, assign our camera booms, so that's going to be equal to our transform.parent. We're going to get into our void update function. This is where our inputs are going to be at. And we're going to assign these inputs based off of the old input system. Now, like I said before, if you are not using the old input system, then you can input your own input system as well. But if you are using the input system or the legacy edition input system, make sure that you go over to the project settings, input manager, and then just assign these here. So you're just going to add a couple axes, and I'll just open them up for you so you can see. So you're going to have a look for your joystick axis. So as you can see, this is your joystick look. You're going to have one for your turn, and this is, of course, your joystick axis for your turn and all the settings that go along with it. This is your look input for your mouse. So there's your settings as well. And then your look or your turn input settings for your mouse as well. So we essentially are just running 2 different inputs for one, as you should. But I digress. All right, so let's head back over into Visual Studios. All right, so here we're just simply grabbing those axes and assigning them. So we're going to say look, which is our variable that we created, or our float variable. And we're going to make it minus equals to our input.getAxis look and multiply it by camera speed. Same thing with our turn, but we're going to plus equals our input.getAxis, which is our turn, and multiply it by camera speed. Next, we're going to clamp our angle so we can't look too far forward or too far back. You know, it's like we don't want to rotate around the character, vertically at least. So we're going to say look is equal to mathf.clamp, look -60 and 60. Instead of our late update function, we're going to assign 2 new functions, which is going to be rotation and adjust camera position. If you see the red squiggly lines, that's fine for now. We're going to fix that in just a second. So for our rotation function, we're just simply going to calculate our rotation based off of our inputs. So we're going to say quaternion desired rot is equal to quaternion.euler. We're going to assign our x-axis by putting in our look value, assign our y-axis by assigning our turn value, and then 0 for our z because there's no point in doing the z. Next, we're going to apply the rotation. So we're going to say camera boom.rotation is equal to our desired rotation. Very, very simple. Now to adjust our camera position, this is sort of where we're going to be interacting with collisions and stuff like that. We're going to calculate the target position. So we're going to say vector 3, target pose, is equal to our target position, which should be our player, minus, minus our camera boom rotation multiplied by that offset. Now keep in mind you will need to put these in parentheses just to make sure it runs this before it subtracts the value. Next we need to do the raycast hit because we want to be able to detect the position that we actually hit, right? So we call this or create a variable for a raycast hit called hit, and inside of here we just simply ask the question. So if physics.linecast, and you could switch this over to a spherecast for better results, but for now this is just what we're using. And I'm going to call this, or we're going to call the position, so target position, and then target pose is going to be our in position. We're going to get our out hit value, right? And then we're going to assign the layers that we can interact with. If we do hit something, we want to set our target pose equal to hit.point minus our offset.normalize multiplied by 0.25f. Now, what we're doing here is we're essentially moving our camera a little bit closer than the actual hit point. So if the hit point is actually in the wall, we don't want our camera inside the wall. So this is just a little bit of an offset. And if you want to adjust that offset, you just need to raise up the value a little bit more. All right, so what we're going to do next is just add in a visual line for our scene view. If you are actually inside of, like if you're actually doing this inside of the actual game, you don't need this right here. But whenever you're testing to make sure everything's working, this is really, really good. So we're saying if we're actually hitting an object, we're going to turn the color green for our line. And if we're not hitting an object, it's going to turn red. All right, so like I said, you don't really need this. That's just optional. At the very end, though, we're going to simply set the position of our camera boom, our parent object, and we're going to say camera boom.position is equal to a vector3.lerp, assign our camera boom.position, and then we're going to assign the position we want to move to, which is the target pose, set the time that we need to move, so a smooth time multiplied by our time.delta time. Okay. So now since we got that taken care of, let's go ahead and head back over into Unity and assign some variables. So make sure that you do have your camera boom set up. So if you don't, just simply right click inside of your hierarchy, create an empty game object, call it camera boom like so. I cannot spell. Boom. Okay. Reset its position. So we're just going to do something like that. Go into our scene view and then just or place it wherever you feel like it should be placed. Keep in mind that if you don't want, or wherever your player spawns, that's sort of where you want your camera boom to spawn. So we could just simply reposition it. So, you know, just maybe like, I think it's 4 high. No, 1.5. There we go. So yeah, you could just reposition it like so. If you have a main camera inside of your scene, or if you don't have a main camera inside of your scene, just simply right click inside the hierarchy, go over to camera, boom, you got it. And then just assign main camera as the tag, and then just drag it onto that camera boom, or just make it look just like this. All right, make sure that you have your camera controller on your actual main camera object, and then inside of here, you're going to assign the values. So target is going to be equal to our player, so just simply drag your player inside of there. Camera speed is equal to whatever you want it to be. Smooth time, whatever you want it to be. Offset, I set mine to 0, negative 0.5, and 4. And then for our obstacle layers, make sure that whatever objects you want the player or the camera to not interact with, just simply select it. So I don't want it to interact with the player, right? So I simply go over to the layers, add a layer. I called it player, but you can call it whatever. And then just simply assign that layer there. So now if we go to our camera, we just simply need to select the obstacle layer, select everything, and then deselect the obstacles that you don't want it to interact with. And then if you hit play, everything else should fall into position. As you can see, it's moving exactly the way we want it to. And yeah, it's perfect. All right, well, I hope you guys enjoyed today. If you did, make sure to leave a like, subscribe, check out some other videos. If you have any questions regarding this video and all, make sure to leave that inside the comments section below, and I'll be happy to get to that as soon as possible. If there's any sort of features that you want me to add to this as well, we're going to get into that as well. Now, I do plan on setting up the next video pretty soon because we're going to be getting into actually adding in the main character and animating that character. So it's going to be a super fun time, and I can't wait to get started with that. But I will see y'all guys later. Bye.